I don't know what I did, but my video is gone and I'm trying to get it back. Pa, 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 pa. I'm going to stop sharing and okay. You can see the screen, everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, hi everyone. I do see some familiar names here, whom I might have interacted in the open lab. So hello again. And for all the new folks who may or may not know me, I'm the newest member of NCBS. I joined as a new faculty in November, November 15th, I believe. And this lecture and the upcoming lecture on Friday, I'll be talking about the cardiovascular development. So basically, I would like to tell you a little bit about what, like what my career path was. It was very, diverse. I did my bachelor's here in India. Then I went on to do my PhD in intestinal stem cells. And from there, I did my postdoc at Stanford, which was cardiovascular biology. And I not only do my research on the development of the cardiovascular system using mouse genetics, but I also utilize the information that I get from these developmental research that I do and apply it to study how it can be used for cardiac regeneration process and the vascular regeneration process in case of heart injury. So that is my expertise. And so today, let me introduce you what we are going to do over the period of 3 hours that we'll be together today and on Friday. So I have divided the lecture into 3 parts. The first part, let me turn on the laser here. Okay. So the first part, we'll be looking at the development of heart in different systems and what all processes are involved, cellular processes mainly, and what are the molecular triggers and what is the timeline and how are the molecular pathways conserved from species to species. We'll start with a simpler heart and we'll go up till the mouse and the human. So based on complexity, we'll compare and contrast how this process of cardiac organogenesis during development happens. And it mostly involves cardiomyocytes, the vascular cells, the coronaries, and the endocardium, so on and so forth. So I'll get to it in detail in a bit. And in part 2, I'll be talking about how the blood vessels develop overall in our body, because that will be important for us to understand how the blood vessels of the heart develop, right? And along with that, I'll be talking about a little bit about the origin of the blood cells, the hematopoietic origin. And in the third part, finally, we'll be talking about the development of the coronaries. So I hope everyone can see how all these 3 parts are correlated. So development of heart, and to understand how the vascular development of heart occurs, we'll be looking at the vascular development of the body and then followed by the heart. I have put my contact information just in case you did not know. Okay, so the goal of these 2 lectures will be to first understand what the anatomy of the heart is or molecular triggers help these cardiomyocytes or the vasculature, the origin of these vasculature. So it's going to be the physiological triggers, the cellular origins, and the molecular pathways. And I do understand that nobody at NCBS right now studies the heart, which is why I took the liberty of, just introducing few slides about the anatomy and function, and I hope that's okay. And then after talking about the origin, once in a while, I'll tell you how some of the information that has been discovered during the developmental, as people were researching the development, how some of that information has been harnessed to use it for more therapeutic purposes. So that gives us the purpose why the study of development of any organ, not just heart, is important, right? And then once in a while, again, I'll be introducing some new technologies that some of you might be interested in knowing how it works and how you can use it to study different aspects of development. So these are some general goals that I have set, and hopefully I meet them. Okay, so moving on to part 1, which is cardiac organogenesis. Okay, yeah, as I was saying, the first few slides, I'll be talking about some, very basic physiological details of the circulatory system, especially the heart. And here is a slide with some fun facts about the heart. So circulatory system is the first ever working unit in a developing embryo. And one can imagine why, right? Because it has to develop first in order to circulate the blood through the whole embryo. So this is the first working unit. And the heart is the first functional organ, of course, because of the same reason, because pumping of the heart is necessary for the embryo to get all the nutrient and oxygen supply. So it's the first functional organ. The heart beats about 100,000 times a day, which is something that amazes me still. And it pumps about 7,200 liters of blood, which is approximately 1,900 gallons. And at any single point, an adult's body can hold 5 liters of blood. That is, again, a huge amount of blood to hold. And this is the best part, which I love as a cardiovascular biologist. If you stretched all your blood vessels, if you took out all your blood vessels from the body and stretched them out, right, it could go up to 96K kilometers, which is pretty vast. I think that is pretty amazing. So here is the anatomy. It's a little cartoon showing what sort of chambers or vessels are in a heart. I think this will be pretty important for you to understand now if you are to understand how each and every part of this organ develops. Okay, so on the left hand side, you see a little cartoon of the heart. And on the right hand side, I have shown a flow chart which shows the biology, the superior vena cava. It collects the blood from the anything. Hello.
Hello, Soumya. I think we lost you there for some time.
Oh, sorry. Where exactly? Should I go back?
No, so this one we heard you, but
Okay.
after this, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Maybe the internet connection at NCBS is not as stable. Okay. Yeah, please interrupt me if you lose me. So what I was saying is on the left-hand side, I'm showing you what all chambers and blood vessels are present in a heart. And it is important for you to understand these anatomical, the details of this complex organ, because as we move forward, I'll talk about how these structures come into, how are they developing from a single cell. So it's important that you understand what each part is, what each chamber does, and so on and so forth. And on right hand side, basically, I'm showing you the path of blood flow in and out of the heart. And as I was saying, the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, they collect blood from the different parts of the body, and this will be deoxygenated in blue. That is the color that we
Hello?
go for deoxygen. Hello?
Hello, yeah, we lost you again. We lost you from when you were talking about the inferior and superior vena cava collecting the blood.
Oh no. Okay. Sorry. I'm not sure what is wrong. So the vena cavas, basically superior and inferior, they collect the deoxygenated blood from the rest of the body, and they put it in the right atrium, right? It is pretty, I hope it is clear from here, this picture, that superior vena cava, there is a vessel that goes into the right atrium. The inferior vena cava, it takes the blood into the right atrium again, as shown here. And then that deoxygenated blood through the tricuspid valve goes into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, so basically I'm just trying to correlate the picture to the flow chart here. So if you don't mind going back and forth. From the right ventricle, the deoxygenated blood goes through the pulmonary artery into the lungs. In the lungs, it is oxygenated. The blood is oxygenated, right? So now the box, you can see it, I have just made it red for you to understand that all this is deoxygenated blood, and once it enters the lungs, it is oxygenated, and it is enriched in oxygen. And from the lungs, then it is brought back to the left atrium through pulmonary vein. Oh, I missed to write it here, but you can clearly see here in this picture, through the pulmonary vein, it goes to the left atrium, then to the left ventricle, and through the aortic valves, it goes into the aorta, as you can see here, and then distributed throughout the body. Okay. And when I say to the rest of the body, it, of course, through different branches of the aorta, it will go into different organs and into the entire whole body circulation, but it will also go to the coronaries. Now, what are coronaries? Coronaries are the vessels that supply the heart itself. So heart is supplying the blood, is pumping the blood to the rest of the body, but as an organ that needs oxygen to function, the muscle of the heart and different parts of the heart also need oxygen supply, right? So for that, there is a special set of arteries, veins, and capillaries that go into the heart, and these are called coronaries. So from the aorta, a branch comes out, it takes the blood to the rest of the body, and then there is a second pathway where the blood goes to the coronaries and supplies oxygen to the heart. Okay. Now, hopefully everyone understood, the chambers and the aorta and, like what is the basic function. And I'm sure everyone by now, since you have gone, you have done so many lectures of developmental biology, everyone knows what this picture is. It is basically the coronal section of an embryonic disc. And what this picture is showing is the mesodermal lineage. Okay. And I will be only focusing on the lateral plate mesoderm, which is here, this part in the right, because that is the part that gives rise to heart, the blood vessels, blood cells of the circulatory system, and the coronaries. Okay. So this structure here is the lateral plate mesoderm, and the splanchnic mesoderm basically gives rise to the entire circulatory system, and I'll show you how. And as part of the circulatory system, I have drawn this blue box so that you can correlate what structures come out of what, which part of the mesoderm. So splanchnic will give rise to the heart, the entire blood vessels throughout the body, the blood cells, and the coronaries. And the lateral plate mesoderm also gives rise to the lining of the body cavities, here written in, like highlighted in yellow, and the pelvic limbs skeleton. And also it gives rise to the extra embryonic membranes, which is extremely important for the exchange of oxygen and nutrients to the embryo. But for now, we are not concerned with the somatic and the extra embryonic lateral plate mesoderm. We'll be only learning about how the splanchnic lateral plate mesoderm region gives rise to all these circulatory, the players of the circulatory system. Okay. So as you saw in that little cartoon that I showed you it's technically a cartoon of a human heart, which is pretty complex. It has like so many chambers and so many blood vessels, and you can imagine that that only makes the whole process of origin or development of this complex organ even more complex. So what I would, keep an eye open for as we proceed through the lecture, keep an eye open for all these processes that are happening and how they are being coordinated. These are some of the cellular events that happen during the development of the heart. And at a given time point, you will see that multiple events are happening at the same time. So there is migration of the precursor cells, then there is proliferation, then based on what kind of molecular signals are influencing these precursor cells, the cell fate is determined. So that process is called as specification. Morphogenesis, meaning there is change in structure, morphological appearance of the organ. So this is, I think this is very cool, and I'll show you a little video about how the heart changes or undergoes morphogenesis as time goes by. And there is also differentiation. Of course, the origin of the cells, the cells that give rise to different types of cells in the heart, they are multipotent. So they have to undergo differentiation and transdifferentiation in order to make this complex organ, right? And then, of course, as the embryo develops, there is growth of the organ that adds up more complexity to the organ. So these are some of the many things that are happening, and most of them are happening all at the same time. So it is pretty complicated, but let's see how that goes. Okay, so tunicate heart. I wanted to start with the simplest heart, or as they call it, simplest, because it's a marine invertebrate. It is not as complex as the mammal, but you can see that I put a question mark because I still think that the simplest heart is not as simple as people think it is. So it is closest to the vertebrate. So in many cases, actually, people do research on the tunicate heart because it is easy to manipulate. The fewer cells you have in an organism, the easier it becomes to manipulate. So for that matter, this is one of the popular experimental models to study the development of the heart. And also because even though it is an invertebrate, it is pretty close to a vertebrate heart in terms of what kind of molecular signals there are that play a role in its development. Okay, so it is a single chambered heart though, unlike mammals where we have 4-chamber heart, right? 2 atria, 2 ventricle. Instead of that, the tunicate heart is a single chambered heart and consists of only 24 cells. But the cool part is it arises from a single precursor cell, as you can see, and which gives rise to an entire heart. Okay, and there are a bunch of molecular signals that play a role in this whole process that again dictate the cell cycle, the division of the cells, the expansion, migration, and the fate determination. So this is basically immunostaining, a whole immunostaining done on a tunicate heart. And in red, you see all the cells. So this is like pan cell. It's like everywhere. And in green, you can see that it is a precursor. You can see these two green dots, right? So these are basically two precursor cells that have originated from a single progenitor cell. If you remember, I just said that the whole heart comes from a single precursor cell. So that single precursor cell, which is positive for MESP, and eventually you will learn that MESP is one of the key drivers, key transcription factor, expression of which decides the cardiac fate of the cell. So as soon as the precursor, any cell expresses MESP1, it is fated to be cardiac. It is fated to be a cardiac cell, basically. So it all starts with a single precursor cell, and it divides asymmetrically. In this case, in a tunicate heart. In this case, it makes the anterior pharyngeal muscle precursor, which goes on to, build the muscles, the anterior muscles, and the smaller cell here becomes the heart precursor cells. And now, based on what kind of molecules the anterior pharyngeal muscle precursor cell here produces, in this case, the retinoic acid gradient that it builds up, based on that, this heart precursor cells migrate along the edges here, along the endoderm. And after the migration, it is being specified to become the heart. So you can see that it started with one cell, but here at least you can see at least 8 different nuclei, right? So this will divide and organize itself and be specified. And throughout this process, the MESP expression is there, which is what decides the cardiac fate. Now, what differentiates the heart from these anterior muscles, even though they originate from a single cell? The deciding factor here is the expression of a receptor, FGF receptor. If the fibroblast growth factor receptor is present, it along with the MESP, it fates the cells to become the heart cell. And then these cells start expressing all these cardiac specific transcription factors, NKX 2.5, GATA, hand family transcription factors, and that is a different story. And if these cells do not express the FGF receptor, but even though they have the MESP, they are not going to make the heart. So this is the story of a tunicate heart. Now this is the so-called simpler heart, which still undergoes at least 3 different cellular, processes: the asymmetric cell division, migration, the specification based on MESP and FGFR expression, right? And next, I wanted to, walk you through the chick heart development, because it's the next popular experimental model that people have used to study heart development, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so in this, in the chick, the heart forms from a cardiogenic mesoderm, which is pretty much what happens in the mammals. If you remember the lateral mesoderm picture that I showed you, that the cardiogenic portion of that mesoderm basically gives rise to the heart, and that is exactly what happens in the chick. And here, there are at least 3 processes that are happening: the migration of the precursor cells, the proliferation, and the specification. So here, I'm going to show you how it happens in a 3-step process. The first one is early induction, which is pretty much the trigger that these cells in the epiblast get. And this trigger, when I say trigger, I mean to say the molecular triggers. There is TGF-beta and activin signaling that influences a specific group of cells in the epiblast. And the origin of this molecular signaling is from the hypoblast that specifies a certain set of cells in the epiblast to become cardiopotent, right? And when I say cardiopotent, that means that they have the potential to give rise to the cardiac cells, right? So this is the early induction process. So it's basically in induction of the cardiac fate. This is where everything starts. Then happens the progenitor migration. So once these cells are formed, they migrate, and I'm not sure if you can see these dashed green arrows, right? So these arrows show you the direction of the migration of these cardiopotent cells. So they will proliferate and they will start migrating along these axes laterally in response to BMP, Wnt3, and FGF. And we learned about MES, FGF in the early tunicate heart, right? So FGF is pretty important. And in detail, we will learn about how these three factors come together in order to direct the migration and proliferation of these cells. So they migrate along these lines laterally, and what they make is the heart field. So heart field is nothing but a region of the early embryo, where the precursor cells are sitting. Okay, the precursor cells are residing, and these cells, these precursor cells of the heart fields will eventually go on. They will undergo specification and proliferation, differentiation, and they will build the entire heart, which I'm going to show you in the next few slides. And as mentioned here in this progenitor migration, these three molecular signals, the Wnt molecule, the Wnt signaling, the FGF signaling, and the BMP2 signaling, they either positively or negatively impact the creation of the heart field, and that determines the cardiac fate. So as you can see, just to summarize, the cardiopotent cells are first specified in the epiblast, then they undergo proliferation and migration, then they create the heart fields. There are two heart fields because they will eventually come together and make a single heart, but it starts out as two heart fields. And now I wanted to talk a little bit about what heart fields are exactly. And this is again in the chick, right? So the heart fields are, again, they have two lineages basically. The first lineage comes in, of course, first, and it is literally just called as first heart field because it comes first. The first set of cells that reach that region of the heart field. And there is a second heart field that comes like half a day later or something. And in this picture, in this series of pictures, you can see that it's all color coded. You can see that the first heart field is green in color and the second heart field is red in color. And based on the kind of molecules they are expressing, when they appear, and what kind of structure they are making eventually, these heart fields are named, right? The first, that is how they are distinguished. That is how the first heart field is distinguished from the second heart field, right? So here you can see that the first heart field makes the heart tube. HT is heart tube, and second heart field contributes minimally to the initial stages. But eventually, as you go on along the line of development, you can see that the first heart field is making the left atrium, the right atrium, which is kind of hiding here, and the left ventricle. And the second heart field is making the rest of the stuff, the right ventricle, the connecting tube, and the outflow tract and its branches. There is also something called as proepicardium. This is a set of cells that cover, that make the cover of the heart. It's like they create a sheet around the heart. So this proepicardium cell these set of cells, they make the epicardium. So you can see that these gray cells, you can see these lines, they make that lining of cells around the heart. Okay. Now we started with the tunicate heart, then yeah.
I just had a doubt. In this picture, what are these cardiac neural crest cells, and where do those come from?
Cardiac neural crest cells will, they will actually build the outflow tract septation. Do you see these? So this is the outflow tract, right? Outflow tract meaning the blood vessel that will take the blood out of the heart, the left ventricle, and it will distribute to the rest of the body. And that outflow tract needs to be septated, because the entire body cannot, like a single vessel cannot supply to the whole heart efficiently. So it needs to undergo septation, right? And sorry, I actually missed to tell you about that. So the cardiac neural crest cells basically make the outflow tract septation, and then they remodel the greater arteries, as you can see here. So these three branches, can you see the laser pointer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these three branches are basically, even though they are primarily made by the second heart field, but they are also contributed through the cardiac neural crest cells.
Okay, thank you. So do they also come from the mesoderm?
Neural crest cells, I was hoping you guys already went through this in the Dev Bio other classes. Should I go over
No,
the origin?
I'm not familiar with the neural. Is it the same neural crest cells that we see in the neural tube during the folding of the neural tube?
Yes, it
Okay.
is a set. Yeah, it is not all those cells. It is a part of those cells that migrate out, and then they contribute here in the septation. Yes.
Okay, yeah.
It's just the nomenclature of it is slightly different, but it is part of that set of neural crest cells.
Okay, yeah. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I completely forgot to mention that.
So these cardiac neural crest cells should be neural cells from the peripheral nervous system.
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello? Hello? Sorry, should I rejoin? I'm not sure if I'm still connected.
No.
We can hear you.
No, we can hear you.
Hello, Soumya, we can hear you. He said that he'll ask his question at the end of the lecture.
Hello?
I think she is not probably able to hear us.
Sonia, can you hear us?
Hello?
Sonia,
Yeah?
can you
Hello?
hear us?
Yeah, you guys are breaking. I don't know if it's probably the internet at my end.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a lot of disturbance here. I completely missed what happened in the last few minutes.
Sonia, maybe you can switch off your video, so that would give a better bandwidth for the presentation. because we could hear you. I think you could not hear us.
Okay, okay. Let me do that. Okay, where is the video? Nope. Nope. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just turned off my video. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, sorry about the disturbance. I'm not sure what else I can do. Um,
Hello, Soumya, we can't hear you.
okay. Well, I'm not muted. I don't know what is wrong.
We can hear
I
you
can-
now, but the last maybe 2-3 minutes we didn't hear what you were saying.
Oh. Oh God. Okay. Can you hear me now, Varsha?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about the disturbance. The internet is not as stable as I was hoping it would be in my office. Can I move forward? I completely missed what was going on in past 5 minutes or so.
Yes, please continue.
Yes.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about the chick heart after we talked about the tunicate, and now I'm going to slowly move on to the mice. And in mice, again, the same concept. There is the same concept of heart fields as well, just as what we saw in the chick. There will be two heart fields that will form, and during the development at about embryonic day 7.5, these two heart fields will be coming together because eventually they are going to fuse, right? That's what I mentioned earlier, that these two heart fields are going to fuse together, and then they will start making these different structures of the heart, starting with the heart tube. And that again in the mice, um, uh, there is a lot of cellular processes that are involved. Proliferation, specification, morphogenesis is one of the major things that I completely enjoy studying, differentiation and growth. And I keep mentioning these processes because as you can imagine, that is my expertise. I'm being a cell biologist, I'm very curious about how the cells are behaving and how can we study them as the development happens, right? Okay, so coming back to the mouse embryo, the two heart fields at embryonic day 7.5 in a mouse embryo, they start coming together, and as they approach each other from the two sides, as you can see here, they make this structure which looks like a crescent and hence called as cardiac crescent. It is just the name. This is just a transition phase where the heart fields are coming together, and that's how they appear. So in red, in this picture, you can see the first heart field, and in green, you can see the second heart field. In this particular chapter, they have, this is a chapter from a book, they have again subdivided the second heart field into anterior and posterior. right? And they have, you can see the color code on the developing heart. And as the embryo goes from embryonic day 7.5 to 8.5, all the way to 14.5, how does it, how does the heart field contribute to different structures? So as you can see, the first heart field, which is red in color, majorly gives rise to the left ventricle. And it has been known that it has been also shown experimentally that the proliferative capacity of these cells in the first heart field is very limited, which is probably why people think, the folks in the field, they hypothesize that because of this limited proliferative capacity, the first heart field cells can only give rise to a smaller structure, which is the left ventricle. But it is still pretty important structure, because left ventricle is the chamber that pumps the blood to the rest of the body. So the muscle has to be pretty strong and it has to be thick and strong for that pumping to happen. So even though the first heart field cells give rise to left ventricle only, and the second heart field gives rise to pretty much everything else on and off. You can see here, there's tiny bit of a contribution of the red first heart field cells in the rest part of the heart. It is still important. It is still a very important function for the cells of the first heart field, right? And here, basically, I wanted to show you the different kind of cells the first heart field and the second heart field are making. And this is all color coded, basically. In red, you can see the structures that are part of the circulatory system, such as the ventricles, the atria, right ventricle here, aorta, pulmonary trunk, so on and so forth. In blue, you can see any other non-cardiac muscles. So any other muscles, whether it is skeletal muscle or facial muscle, which is not related to the cardiac origin. Any non-cardiac muscles is mentioned in blue here, okay? And in green, you can see the endothelial cells, which is up high here. And in purple, you can see the perivascular cells, which are the smooth muscle cells, which is shown here. Well, I did not mention what the perivascular cells are, because we'll be talking about it when we talk about the blood vessels, right? So just briefly, I don't want you to, not know what they are, because that might, affect the understanding of this whole process. So in a blood vessel, the inner lining is of endothelial cells, right? But there is an outer sheet of perivascular cells, as they call it, that holds the endothelial cell, that makes it a more stable structure. And these cells, they are called perivascular because they are at the periphery of the endothelial cells, right? Hence the name perivascular. And there are at least two kinds of such cells. One is the smooth muscle cells, which is wrapping around the endothelial cells. The other one is the pericytes. Pericytes are basically the progenitors of the smooth muscle cells, okay? So the endothelial cells and the perivascular cells are part of the blood vessels, you can say. And in red, which is what we are talking about right now and are interested to know right now, is the circulatory system. So in the early embryo, if you remember, all the cardiopotent cells are arising from the epiblast. And in a mouse at embryonic 6.5 day, the first lineage, which is the first heart field, appears, and it majorly gives rise to the left ventricle. And you can see how it's been distinguished from the rest of the part of the heart that the first heart field contributes to. It's been bolded because that is the major contribution of the heart, the first heart field. And after half a day or so, at embryonic day 7, the second lineage appears, and which is we call as the second heart field. And this second heart field contributes to a lot of things, not just the heart. As you can see in the circulatory system, it builds the right ventricle, aorta, a lot of contribution to the aorta and the pulmonary trunk, the pulmonary vein, the left superior, oh, this is the subclavian vein, the right atrium, the atrioventricular canal, so on and so forth. So all these are part of the heart and its circulatory system. And apart from just contributing to the circulatory system, it is also contributing to a lot of lungs and non-cardiac muscle cells. Okay, so this is basically what the lineage looks like. So the first heart field appears first, the second heart field, as the name itself suggests, appears second, like half a day delayed appearance. And then the first heart field majorly contributes to the left ventricle and minimally to the rest of the heart. And the second heart field cells take care of the rest of the, anything other than the left ventricle is majorly built by the second heart field cells. And this is again just another picture showing what I showed you earlier, how the first heart field is building the left ventricle. But here I have just included, I took this picture because it shows that how a single progenitor cells, and based on what kind of markers it is expressing or is being influenced by, it can either, it can
Hello, Samya, we lost you again. We lost you from the single precursor cell.
the cardiac. Okay. Did you lose me here or the next slide?
No, in the next slide,
Next
we're
slide.
talking about the different markers for the single precursor cell.
Okay. All right. So what I was trying to say is that this lineage, the heart field lineage tree that you see on the screen, it is pretty similar to what you just saw in the previous slide, except it tells us a little bit more about the molecular markers that are expressed in these cells at different stages. For example, it all starts with a single progenitor cells, but depending on what kind of markers they are expressing or what kind of molecular signaling they are influenced by, they are destined to either become the first heart field cells that give rise to the left ventricle, or they are destined to become the second heart field, which gives rise to the rest of the heart, right? So, and of course, the second heart field also contributes to face and lung cells and so on and so forth. So this is something to keep in mind, that every step of the way, even though it all starts with a progenitor cell, but there are molecular signals that are driving every step of differentiation or specification, and these molecules are deciding whether cells are destined to make the left ventricle by contributing through the first heart field, or to contribute to the rest of the heart by becoming second heart field precursor cells. Oh, yeah. So this is actually a question that I put in here because I thought it will be interesting to see. This was actually one of the questions that when I was in grad school, my teacher asked me, and let me see if you guys can get it right. So the question here is, we learned about the first heart field and second heart field, right? And I was just, I'm curious to know what you guys think of what kind of experiments one can do to identify what sort of cells, whether which part of the cardiac crescent, as it says here, gives rise to which region of the developing heart. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like which as you can see here, right, different regions of the first heart field and the second heart field are contributing to different regions of the actually developed heart in the mice. So my question here is, what sort of experiment can one do to see which part of those, which part of the cardiac crescent or the heart fields gives rise to which region of the developing heart? And this is like not a quiz. I just wanted to see if, if anybody has any thoughts or, ideas. There are
We
like
can do
multiple, yeah.
a genetic experiment by labeling, by putting GFP under promoters of specific promoters, so that uh, every time that promoter is switched on, we would be able to visualize particular region of the developing heart.
That's great. Yes, that will be the way to go. But can somebody also think of how are you going to identify which promoter to put the GFP in? Because that is, I guess, to do that kind of experiment, you will first need to identify a promoter, correct?
Okay, so maybe we'll have to section different regions of the heart, and we can do some RNA sequencing to understand the genes, mRNA that's upregulated in certain regions compared to the other. But I'm not sure the control that we can use for that.
Okay. Anybody else? That was great. Anybody else wants to add anything here?
Can we use vital stains?
How would you, can you elaborate a little bit on what do you mean by vital stains and how can you use those?
So vital stains are like they're stains that stain the cells without killing them. So if you have like the
Okay.
first heart field or the second heart field, you can stain one of them in the early embryo and then find out which region of the fully developed heart has the vital stain. Or even if vital staining is not possible, you can add radionucleotides to one of the heart fields and then find out which parts of the future heart have radioactivity.
Wonderful. I think that's a great idea. But I'm not so sure about the vital stains because actually it's probably my ignorance. I don't know how long the vital stains can stay along the period of development and if they appear at the end point, right? Because that's where we are looking. Did I make sense? Okay.
Yes, so that is why they went on to use radionucleotides.
Yeah. Anybody else want to take a hint? Okay.
Can we do transplantation assays?
Yes, you can. I mean, in theory, you can do transplant assays, but can you again elaborate, like how would you do that?
So, I mean, in the chick,
what kind of, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so in the chick, these kinds of experiments are done very usually, right? So they take from quail embryos and they transplant at a very early stage, they transplant a piece of the tissue. So when the chick grows up, the organs that are contributed by the quail embryo would have the quail phenotype. So
yes, but in context of this, heart field, do you plan to take out? Do you plan to transplant the heart field cells into these chick embryos? Is that what you are?
yeah. So you take the region of interest from the quail embryo and transplant it into a chick embryo where the region of interest has been removed. So the quail embryos, they grow up as adults also, and you can see the phenotype.
So in
You
that
can see
scenario, yeah, I think that's great. But in that scenario, how would the existing heart field of the chick, right? You are going to remove it, or you are going to replace it?
We are going to replace it with the quail embryo's heart field.
Okay. In that case, you first need to identify the heart field somehow, right? Because
yes.
unless,
So this would be like a trial and error experiment. So like small pieces of the heart, the tubular heart before the tubular heart is formed. So you just do the experiment multiple times, so you know which part of the heart field gives rise to what.
okay, trial and hit. Okay, yeah, I think these are all great ideas, and this is exactly the question that I got during my grad school. So I thought it would be fun to put it out there for you guys, and you guys just did great. For folks who this is how I see it as a mouse geneticist and somebody who works with the heart a lot. I put it in like very simple words because I was not sure if if everyone in the room can really understand what all these terms mean. So the idea here is that we want to take, or the question here is that we want to first see what are the cells that are present in the heart fields, right, or the cardiac crescent. We first want to identify them, find markers, and then try to see what kind of what region of the developing heart they are developing into, basically. So I here listed, and this was just my first thought back then, so I thought it would be fun to just write it down. So I wrote down 4 experiments that one can do using mice, at least. And I think the experiment with the chick is also pretty cool, which people do a lot. So the first thing that I will do is I will try to find markers, right, as it was suggested by one of you. I'll first find the markers in the cardiac crescent that label either the first heart field or the second heart field. And how will I do that? I will either do a bunch of, you can do a more candidate, you can take a more candidate approach where you take a bunch of, markers and just test them on sections or on organs, and do immunostaining or in situ hybridization, and come up with markers that either label the first heart field or the second heart field. That is one way of doing it, taking a candidate approach. You look at the literature and you see, okay, these are the pathways that are influencing, so the receptor could be present in these cells, so let me just stain with these receptors and see if anything is specific to the first heart field or the second heart field. So that's one way of doing it. And the second way of doing it is you go into the embryo and you just dissect out the cardiac crescent and try to sequence it, basically. And these days you have like many how to say, a lot of sophisticated single cell RNA sequencing, whether it is involving 10x platform or SmartSeq. So you can do sequencing and come up with the markers that label first heart field or second heart field. And this is a more unbiased approach because you are not biased whether this molecule is present in first heart field or this molecule is present in second heart field. You are just taking all the cells, sequencing them, and trying to find out which is present where based on the literature, right? So first experiment that I'll do is find out what is a marker for the first heart field or second heart field. Now, the second experiment that I'll do is based on which is the most promising marker Of course, after that, after finding that marker, you need to validate it in many ways, right? You need to stain it, you need to do in situ. In some cases, people just, they knock it out and then see what is the phenotype and if it correlates to the function of the heart field, so on and so forth. You can validate it in 100 ways that you want, but eventually to see what all cells it gives rise to, you need to make a mouse. Okay, and again, I'm just talking about the mouse here, but all the ideas that you gave were all good and can be tested. I just want to emphasize on that. So you need to make a mouse where you put a fluorescent reporter or a non-fluorescent reporter, any reporter, which is driven by the expression of the promoter, which is going to be the marker that you found out, right? And even better if it can be an inducible system, where you can induce induce the expression of that reporter at a certain time, and then look along the developmental pathway. You can, developmental time, you can look where does that reporter end up in the developing heart. Okay, so if you label it at this stage, if you label the first heart field as red with your red reporter, I'm just using layman language now. If you have a red reporter in the first heart field, you will induce it at 7.5 so that the first heart field becomes red, and then it grows, and at 14.5 heart, and you will check where exactly the red reporter gets expressed. And in this case, it will be left ventricle, right? And then even to know for you to identify those regions. So what, based on what kind of expertise I have, I would do this kind of, single cell RNA sequencing, and then a genetic lineage tracing experiment to identify or to address this kind of question. Did I make sense? And do you guys see how, there are like multiple ways of doing this? Everything that you said, and I think everything that I said, all of these methods can be used to address this question, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I'm not sure if you can hear me, or is it just, the general silence of the audience?
Soumya, we are losing you again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what I can do to fix this. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. So moving on, what I was saying is that I wanted to emphasize that all these cells that are building the heart, and all the cardiomyocytes or the endothelial cells, or the perivascular cells or the endocardium, whatever it is, all these cells in the early embryonic stage, they are coming from a single progenitor cell, or at the best a very handful of multipotent progenitor cells, right? This is what I want you to remember. And this is, and people have used that fact that a single progenitor cell can give rise to the entire heart. They have used this information and tried to build assays, in vitro assays, like assays in a dish, to understand, to build a experimental model that can be easily manipulated, tested, and tried. Okay, and when I say that, I wanted to introduce you to this whole in vitro assay that folks have come up with, where they take the human-induced pluripotent cells, and based on the information that they have from the developmental research, they use B27 insulin and CHR, which is like a Wnt antagonist. You don't need to know all these details, but I'm just saying that all these information that you have from a developmental research article, you can take, they have taken these information, and along a period of 12 days, they have induced these pluripotent cells into mesoderm, into cardiac mesoderm specifically, into cardiomyocytes, and they have grown these cardiomyocytes in a dish, right? So similar way, and this is just making cardiomyocytes from pluripotent cells in a dish, but nowadays people are making arteries, coronary arteries in a dish, or a vascular plexus in a dish. So these are all very important strategies, because animal body can be very complex, and it becomes very difficult sometimes to parse out all the details and subtract all the how to say, the influence of different pathways. So if you have things in a dish, you can add a drug or remove a drug, basically adding a molecular pathway and depleting a molecular pathway, and you can study it in greater detail. That is the whole idea behind it. And by doing so, I'm not sure if people have seen this video, but it still amazes me. So I decided that I will show this video, if only it works. Oh God, okay. Okay. So this is, can you see all these cells beating at the same rhythm? It's called automated, rhythmic beating of cells. Am I cut again, or how can you guys see it?
We can see it.
We can see.
Okay. Okay. So cardiomyocytes, as you know, the function is to the pluripotent cell, and whatever information they had from the developmental aspect, they tried, and they came up with this flow pipeline where you can add things and remove things, add molecular signals and remove molecular signals, and they made this sheet of cardiomyocytes that not just is molecular, the expression of molecules has been validated, but it also functions as cardiomyocytes. Of course, it's not like a 3D structure, but the properties have been validated, and it functioned, and the functional aspect is being conserved. And yeah, so they are beating. I thought it was pretty cool, so I wanted to show it. Okay, now moving on. Okay, so now, so we have, we looked at how the cardiac fate is destined, and molecular pathways, somewhat, a little bit of molecular pathways that are involved, MESP1 and Wnt and BMP2 in the chick and tunicate, and in mice, we will learn about BMP2 and FGF and, Wnt antagonists, so on and so forth. But morphogenesis is also a huge part of the heart development. So this is the change in the morphological appearance, right? How the heart changes its appearance, you can see, and how does it come from this tube-like structure? How does it become this, four-chambered complicated structure? So there is growth involved, and then there is morphogenesis involved in this. And in this case, the first heart field, second heart field, they come together, as I was saying. This would be the cardiac crescent part, and they will come together to make the heart tube that will undergo looping, which is a major part of morphogenesis, to make the four chambers that finally looks like this. Okay. And when I say that it finally looks like this is only embryonic day 10.5. And even though it looks very uniform, if you slice it, if you do a sagittal section of it, you can see that at 12.5, embryonic day 12.5, you can see all these cells that are tightly packed, and they are called compact myocardium. And there are also cells that are loosely packed, that are trabecular myocardium. And you don't need to know the details of it. I just wanted to show the deep, like there are too many things going on in the heart. So even if we think of it as a four-chambered heart, a four-chambered organ, but when you slice it up, there are multiple kinds of cells. So even the cardiac muscle is divided into compact myocardium, which builds the heart wall, and the trabecular myocardium, which is adjacent to the compact myocardium, and it provides signals to the compact myocardium so that the vasculature develops eventually. Okay, and this is just the molecules. This is immunostaining for this square that you see, and you can see the compact myocardium, the trabecular myocardium, and if there is any change in the signals that the compact myocardium gets, if there is depletion of, for example, here a chromatin remodeler, INO80, you can see that the compact myocardium is now reduced, and now the heart does not function properly. It does not beat, and the animal cannot survive. Okay. So coming back to the morphogenesis, in this case, you can see that how the morphogenesis of a human heart, this is a cartoon, though, is very similar to the morphogenesis that happens in the mice. Right? And when I say morphogenesis, it is pretty tough to, at least for me in the beginning,
Hello, Samya, we lost
back
you.
in graduate school, it was very tough for me to understand the morphogenesis. Okay, can you hear me now? Should I go back?
No, you were talking about morphogenesis from here only, this slide. We can hear you now, by the way.
Okay. So this is basically, I was talking about the mouse heart morphogenesis here, how it is changing its shape and structure as you go from embryonic day 7.5 to 10.5. And then I wanted to show you that that path of morphogenesis is very similar to what we see in human, which is why mice are such, they are good models to study these kind of morphogenesis events. And I wanted to show basically a video of how this morphogenesis is occurring, because how exactly a heart tube like this becomes a four-chambered heart, right? There is a lot of structural changes that is happening. And I just wanted to show you this video and tell me if you can see it. Can you see it?
No, right now we cannot.
Not yet.
Slide.
Okay. Sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to the front. Let me just stop sharing and then I'll start sharing the whole. Okay. bear with me for a second. Okay, can you see now? No?
No, we can't see the video playing.
But can you see the screen or no?
Yeah, we can
Yes,
see the web browser.
it says exit to click to exit full screen.
Click to sharing it from, bring your shared window to the front. Sorry guys, bear with me please. You are screen sharing. Okay,
We
is
can
this
see it.
working now? Okay, all right. Okay, remember how I told you that there is a big deal of morphogenesis happening, right? And this is a video that could, you know, it cannot be simplified in a better way. I love this video. The heart tubes are coming together and they fuse, as you can see. You can see it here, right? They're fusing. There is the arterial end of the heart. There is fusion happening of the heart tubes, and then there is a venous end of the heart. Correct? And then, of course, the heart tube grows, and you can see how they have color coded it. So this purple part is going to become the top two chambers, the atrium, right? The atria, left atria and the right atria. And in the green part is going to become the ventricle, the left ventricle and the right ventricle. Okay, so keep an eye out for these two, green and the purple or magenta, whatever you call it. Okay, can you see now how it loops? So it bulges to make those, ventricular chambers, and then it goes morphogenesis in these directions. So it's looping. This is called as looping. Okay, so these two green, bulges, these will be left and right ventricle, but the atrium at this stage is still at the bottom of the ventricle. Eventually, it will go, bulge and loop and go to the top. Keep an eye out. Okay, did you see that? Now it will show. Okay, so this is the right atrium, left atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle, right? So this is how it becomes the four-chambered heart. Now they will show you a angle from the side, because that will help you. So basically, this is the heart tube, the frontal view that we saw, the heart tubes coming together. And this is what you see from the side, right? So keep an eye out, can compare, see how this is bulging and how the atrium is now bulging, not only bulging, but it will go up. And this is all called, is part of the looping. So at this stage, basically, this is how we call, this is what we call as the top to atrial chamber and the bottom to ventral chamber. This is how it looks from the side. And this is in an angle. I found this video very useful, but maybe you guys already know about it. So you can see how it goes. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now and go back to my presentation. And then I will start sharing again. Okay, share. Okay, can you guys see my screen now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so basically it does not do justice when they show these 2D pictures, right? In the textbook, I mean, they don't have any other way of showing it. So how does a heart tube goes to become, like they go from day 21 to 28, but how does a tube become a 4-chambered thing, a 4-chambered organ? So which is why I think the video is very useful, and you can see how exactly it becomes that, right? Okay. Vasha, how long do I have now? Or is there a,
O'clock.
what is it?
The class is till 11 o'clock, and after that, they have another class, the students.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me see. Oh, okay. Okay, so just stop me in 5 minutes. So this is early cardiovascular.
Is it only me or did we all lose her?
Lineage 3, and as I keep saying, MESP1 is very active, endothelial growth factor, which another name for it is FLIC1. Then they go on to become endothelial or hematopoietic hematopoietic lineage, which is the blood cell lineage, and we'll talk about it later. And there are a lot of pathways involved, and some of it I kept mentioning: the MESP1, BMP2, we encountered VEGF8, NKX 2.5 is a transcription factor, just like MESP1, which specifies the heart field cells, and Wnt3 inhibits the heart formation. So noggin and caudin, they are key to, you know, block the BMP signal, which regulates the Wnt pathway. I do not want to rush through this, so let me just finish this slide and I will pause. So coming back to the early heart cell differentiation, I'm going to give you two instances. One is how the cardiogenic mesoderm is built, first of all, and what are the pathways involved. And as we talked about it, the lateral plate mesoderm will give rise to anterior and posterior lateral plate mesoderm. The anterior lateral plate mesoderm will give rise to the cardiogenic mesoderm. Now this step, the first step of lateral plate mesoderm dividing into the anterior and posterior, is driven by Wnt, which is, of course, you must have already learned, is inhibited by all these inhibitors. So this regulation is there. This is the first layer of regulation. But when the anterior lateral plate mesoderm is becoming the cardiogenic mesoderm, it is regulated by not just BMP, but also with FGF8. And noggin and caudin, they regulate the BMP. So it's a mixture of Wnt, noggin, caudin, BMP, and FGF8 that decide how and when the lateral plate mesoderm takes this path through anterior lateral plate mesoderm and becomes cardiogenic mesoderm. Okay. And then there is, of course, the whole posterior lateral plate mesoderm becomes the hemangiogenic mesoderm, and we'll talk about it in later slides. And now talking about the cardiac precursor cells that are within that cardiogenic mesoderm. It is a combination of BMP and Wnt. The BMP helps get them specified to the cardiac destiny by expression of NKX 2.5 and MESP1, which are the transcription factors specific for cardiac fate. And this whole process is inhibited by Wnt. So we have inhibitors that inhibit Wnt so that this process can happen. Okay, and then the heart precursor cells can be specified. And there is a feedback, negative feedback loop through the NKX 2.5. It inhibits BMP so that it can limit heart precursor cells that build heart fields. And of course, the MESP1 is also inhibiting the Wnt so that the cells that are already specified to become cardiac precursor cells are not re-specified to make other kind of cells. And additionally, this inhibition also helps in promoting migration of the precursor cells, the migration process that we saw earlier in the chick heart development. Okay, let me check the time. Okay, maybe I'll just stop here and I'll let you guys figure this out. Cardiac precursor cells. Does that make sense? You guys probably can just take a screenshot and maybe we can discuss about it in the next class. Okay, I think it's 11 o'clock and I don't want to keep anyone longer than I should. So let me know how to proceed from here, Varsha.
Yes. So we can end the class now then and
Okay.
start